What is the creepiest, strangest thing that has happened to you or a friend or family member that creeps you out to this day? Lived in the Hollywood Hills, and this happened in the early 80s. Crazy knocking at my door at 9 p.m. I go to answer the door, and there's a lady there, just hysterical, talking about there's so much blood. She looks normal and is dressed in clean clothing, so we let her in. She tells a story about seeing someone get stabbed. I call the police, and 2 uniformed LAPD officers arrive in 10 minutes. They take the lady away and tell us that she was reported missing, has a mental condition, and lives up the street. All good. 30 minutes later, another knock at the door. 2 different cops this time, responding to the call. They have no idea who the other 2 cops were. Take our information and statements, description of the officers and the lady as well. Radio conversations back and forth ensue, and they really don't have any idea how any other cops could have picked her up because they were given the call 40 minutes ago. I was at a mate's house spending the night when I was in middle school. As expected, we'd stay up to all hours, which didn't matter most of the time, except the bathroom was right near his parents' room. About the only time we'd get in trouble was when someone would wake them up when nature called. To avoid this, we'd go out the basement door and just pee in the woods. The door stayed unlocked most of the time, because we'd managed to lock ourselves out more than once. This was also compounded by the fact that we'd all wander out and find something to do in the woods on a regular basis. This night his older brother was home and kept barging in the basement door and raining chaos from above, so we decided to lock the door just to deter him. Not that it really would have kept him out, but at least he'd have to use the key, and that took barging and fun out of it. About midnight we heard the handle jiggling and didn't think much of it, figuring it was his brother. After about 5 minutes of off and on handle fondling, my vocabulary has decided to not function at a high level. Today we finally hit the door and yelled for him to stop. Quiet. No response, no more clattering of the handle. Great, we can move on, right? Well, about 10 minutes later, it started again, and the process repeated. This went on for about 2 hours, until finally, after telling him to stop, we just said, screw it, and ignored it. He continued for about 30 minutes after our last attempt for him to stop, and then just gave up. Well, fast forward to about 9 a.m. We were just stirring, and one of my mates had to go to the bathroom. If you've ever had a sleepover like that, there are bodies strewn wherever there is space, and once the first person starts walking around, it kind of stirs the nest. We all started stretching and making our way to relieve ourselves of all the soda we'd binged on the night before. As I walk outside, I grab the door handle to close it behind me and noticed it felt rough. After looking at it, I saw that the space around the keyhole was all but destroyed. There were giant scratch marks on every surface, and the metal guides were bent and skewed. I asked my friend that lived there what had happened, and he said it was the first he'd noticed it. Not really wanting to get blamed for something his brother did, we went upstairs and told his parents about the night before. After his dad went down to see what we were talking about, he went completely white and ran upstairs to call the cops. Evidently someone had been trying to force the lock open while we were all inside. That's actually happened to me more than once on different occasions. What completely freaks me out about this time was that this person knew we were in there and that we knew someone was trying to get in. Even so, he repeatedly tried to force his way inside. God knows what sort of person that was.
I'm a female, first of all. I'm 21 now, but when I was 4 years old, my sister had just turned 16. She had just gotten her license and was so excited. It was probably only September, and she got her license in July. My sister is from my dad's first marriage, and she lived with her mom and stepdad while I lived with our dad and my mom. We lived about 30 minutes apart. My dad worked late hours, and my mom frequently traveled for work, so I had to spend a lot of time at babysitters, which was costly until my sister got her license. My dad finally gave her permission to pick me up after she got out of school and take me to her mom's until he was off work. She was so excited to finally be able to use her license. I know I said I was only 4, but I remember this event so vividly. There are parts of it, understandably, that I've forgotten over the years. It took years for my sister to even ask me if I remembered it, but when I told her all the parts I remember, about 80%, she filled in the rest for me. It was one of the first times my sister would get to pick me up from my babysitter, which means it would be one of the first times she'd been allowed to drive with me alone. Almost as soon as we pulled onto the main road, a white pickup truck swerved behind us. Weird, but whatever. After a few turns, my sister noticed that the truck still followed her. Even when she would just switch lanes, he was right there switching behind her. My sister, being a bit of a paranoid person, tested it a little and switched lanes several times. She said she heard his tires squealing by his quick cuts to get behind her again. She told me not to worry, and I remember being an oblivious little kid. She looked scared, but I had no concerns. The man started to get really angry. I don't remember anything about what he looked like. I do remember that he had this look of pure hate on his face. Strange that you can sometimes remember expressions, but not the faces they were on. He wasn't angry, he was full of hate. He was honking the horn repeatedly, just laying on it, and he was very close to our car. He was swerving back and forth, trying to get our attention. He would pull up beside us occasionally, flip us off, and honk. The first big event came about when we pulled up at a 4-way stoplight. It's a bigger one, so there was a lot of room in the intersection. We were the first ones at the stoplight in our lane, and nobody was beside us. The man used this lane to pass us and pull his car in front of us almost in the intersection. He was blocking us. I so vividly remember that white pickup truck. He got out of it and started storming towards our car. He was screaming so hard I remember thinking his face almost looked purple. Neither one of us remembers what he was saying, but he pulled up his shirt to reveal to us that he had a gun. He pointed to it and at us, threatening us and closing the gap between us. My sister put her hand over my body, told me to close my eyes, and floored it through the intersection. She said she was worried we were either going to hit him or get hit in the intersection, but it was a better chance than sitting there and waiting for the psycho with a gun. He hopped back into his car and followed us. My house was closer to where we were than my sister's, so for some reason, she decided to go to my empty house. Obviously, he followed us and blocked us into the driveway. He got out and walked towards my sister's parked car, pulling his gun out. Once again, she had to think fast and swerve her way across our lawn back out on the road. This is before cell phones, and she had just started driving and was still young. She had no idea what to do. He followed us back onto our neighborhood road, pulling up next to our car and hitting his truck against us, trying to make us skid or wreck. There is a smallish area of grass between my neighborhood road and a major busy road, and it was obvious he was trying to push our car hard enough to send us into the traffic beside us. He had his gun up on his dashboard still, all within reach. I remember him doing that little gesture where you drag your finger along your throat, like you're slitting it, like he was going to kill us. His face was still purple. There was a gas station nearby, and my sister decided on the last thing she could think of. I remember her talking to me so seriously and sternly. She told me she needed me to be a big girl, and the second we pulled by the door of the gas station, to undo my seatbelt and jump out, run inside so fast that I shouldn't even worry about closing my door. I was to run inside and go directly to the person behind the counter and tell them to call 911 because a bad man was following us. We pulled in and she threw the car in park, and I jumped out and did as I was told. She was only a few seconds behind, but she had to actually stop the car, park it, turn it off, whatever. She closed her door and mine for me and just ran inside with me. The man came into the parking lot behind us, and when we were inside, he went through my sister's car. By the time the police arrived, he was gone. They never found him, and we never knew what provoked him or what his plan was. The only thing he took from the car was my sister's ID and the cash she had on her.
Have any scary stories happened to you? Tell us about it in the comments. Maybe your story will appear in our next videos.